It's always good to start the session with a background, with the context. I'm not sure how much of I wasn't there in the initial part of this workshop, so I'm not sure how much of conversations you've had around the current threats facing this industry, right? So I just thought we'd spend some time on what drives cybersecurity, specifically the soft models for this industry. So we know that digitization is increasing. There's a lot of automation that's happening in this industry, and as innovations improve and increase, we also look at an increasing convergence of IT, OT, IIoT environments. You also have the concept of edge computing that's used in smart industries, adding another layer of while it improves collaboration and innovation, it adds additional layer of security concerns, right? And not just that, we also see more attacks, specifically in the manufacturing segment, if you look at it, and we've seen that in the last, as early as last month as well, how some threats can be really damaging to not just the organization, but also people who use services from those organizations. And I'll talk about that in the coming slides. I would contest, or I would say that typically when it comes to this industry, there is an underinvestment, if I can say that, on security. And maybe one of the reasons we're all in the workshop is to see how we can improve that, and why cybersecurity becomes a core foundation for collaborative manufacturing, right? I also wanted to talk about some of the trends as well. And just a few weeks back, Verizon released their data breach investigations report, and this is what they had to say about the manufacturing sector in general, right? So there's a lot of focus on stealing information, intellectual property, stealing data. And some of the recent attacks we see are focused on that. But at the same time, there is also a lot of, there has been instances where some of these attacks are, geopolitical. There have been cases of cyber espionage and industry-motivated threats. And many of the times, the attack vectors have been internal employees, trying to trick them into doing something that they shouldn't be doing. And that eventually becomes a factor for some of these attacks to be realized. So this gives us an indication that it is a concern, and some of the trends that we see point us to the fact that we need to think about a better cybersecurity when it comes to manufacturing. Moving on, what I'd like to probably talk about is what are the 5 top cyber threats that we see we should look at. Property theft, or keeping data in ransom, has been one of the top reasons for cyber attackers to extort money from many of the organizations, right? And I talked about edge architectures, edge computing, and while this is this is really important for improving innovation and automation, it brings a new area of concern. So edge compromise can also become a major item for concern. Supply chain compromise, we've seen that just a few months back, we saw a major example of how a compromise of in the supply chain framework can lead to large scale outages and large scale uh, ramifications for organizations. ICS IoT compromise continues to be a top concern, and cloud security. Especially in situations where organizations adopt a multi-cloud strategy, security around cloud also becomes an important area to address. Uh, we've seen some examples in the last few months, few weeks, is about some really large breaches that have been in the news, right? For example, the Mitsubishi hack that happened, there's a lot of sensitive data that was stolen, and not just credentials, but also emails and other sensitive documentation was stolen in that particular example. We also have the North Hydro breach that happened, a couple of years back. Now, this was again a ransomware based attack, which actually forced the company to shut down for some time, and it directed a direct financial impact to the organization. As you can see, the shares went down. So while these are some of the older examples, the most recent one is the one that happened in the US just a few weeks back. The Colonial Pipeline hack has been in the news for quite some time. Over there, and I know personally of my colleagues who were directly impacted by that breach, and that's why I said it's no longer the organization that has to look at, but it's also the people who use some of these services. So I know a lot of people, a lot of colleagues and friends who were directly impacted by this, by the Colonial Pipeline breach ransomware attack, which in fact halted production for many days. So these are all serious repercussions of a threat. And again, some of the top cyber issues that I talked about earlier are the reasons for some of these hacks to happen. So what are the use cases that we see for having again, since the topic is on detection and response, I'm going to focus on why we need advanced detection and response services to combat some of these threats that we have seen. One is, of course, we have to protect intellectual property. This is an ever innovating industry. We look at different technologies, different models coming up. So it's important that a solution is there to help detect and protect intellectual property, that comes out. Protecting industrial networks, we saw examples of how a security breach to an industrial segment can cause large ramifications to regular people and the organization itself. Downtimes are also an important, to reducing downtimes becomes an important factor for a use case for having a robust detection response capabilities. I'm sure my colleague will talk. The speaker is going to talk about threat intelligence and the use of threat intelligence to create adaptive defenses. Threat intel sharing can definitely be useful between collaborators, so that we learn from that and use that to create better defenses. And of course, supply chain attacks. So these are some of the use cases on why we should focus on having a robust detection and response solution. What do we need for that, right? What are the capabilities needed for doing that? Now, so if you look at a typical collaborative manufacturing segment, there's a lot of data that needs to be consumed. You have the traditional IT stack. There's this data from edge computing, usage of cloud, and we know how much of data that cloud generates. And there are thousands and thousands of, or even millions of IT IoT devices, and all of this is going to generate a lot of data. So it is important to use a big data solution that can consume these vast amounts of data, and which of course becomes a base to start identifying anomalies, identifying threats that AI can identify. Of course, AI is needed because we're dealing with a large amount of data, And when you look at some of the traditional solutions, it's going to be very difficult to identify, because this is, these are new threats, these are new technologies. It's going to be very difficult to use traditional techniques to identify some of the advanced threats that we see. And that's the reason we need AI to help us sift through all this vast amounts of data and help the people in the SOC who are going to identify these threats to make sense out of the data and identify the right threats. And it's not just that. I think automation is important. While the industry focuses on automation, from a SOC perspective, also automation becomes a really important element. We should be able to quickly shut down threats, use automation wherever possible to orchestrate responses, allow analysts to gather information faster through automation. All of this is going to help really reduce the downtime. So eventually, there could be a situation where there is a breach. But if there are enough response capabilities, or enough automation capabilities to prevent further damage, it can be as good as the breach never happened. So I believe automation is also a key driver for security operations centers in this industry to be able to take actions a lot faster. So why do we need big data? I did touch upon this. Today, you're looking at collecting data from a myriad set of devices and environments. You have to collect data from some of the traditional security devices that are used to protect IT/OT environments. Users and I did mention that earlier, that many of the breaches happen because of internal employees, either deliberately or inadvertently, being a reason for the attackers to pivot on. So there's a lot of user data that we would need to collect, data from endpoints that our users use, from servers. Cloud becomes an important source of data that needs to be collected. You have the edge computing systems where you would need to collect data, and of course the OT/IoT systems. So there's a lot of data that needs to be collected from all of these systems, and we need to collect more. It's not just important that we collect logs. There's a lot of information that we can collect that can be helpful in a SOC to identify suspicious events. And that's the reason we need a big data platform, because we're not just collecting some data, but we're collecting different kinds of data from different environments, from different systems, and the amount of data can actually be very overwhelming. And to ensure that we're able to treat this data in the right manner, you need a platform that can scale, that can allow faster search of data, allow us to use analytical systems on top of it to identify the right set of information. So big data becomes an important aspect in a SOC that deals with large and vast amounts of data. The other aspect is what needs to be done once we have all the data. So we talked about using AI, but at the same time, there are other aspects that we can use to identify threats. While it did mention that traditional systems are not adequate, but they still continue to be important elements when it comes to identifying cyber threats. So traditional techniques like using rules and signatures can be really helpful in identifying known threats really fast, because we know what we're looking for. When that happens, it becomes easier to use rules and signatures to identify those threats. So it still continues to be an important factor in identifying complex threats. Then we talk about threat intelligence, right? So it's important that we are able to share threat intel information, learn from that, and take adaptive defenses. So I use the term anticipate here because one of the things as providers of security, SOC services, it's important to see what's happening across industries and anticipate that some other organizations could also fall victim to the same kind of threats. So it's important to use threat intelligence in identifying cyber threats. And finally, machine learning, right? So AI, as I mentioned, becomes really important when you're dealing with vast amounts of data. And in those vast amounts of data, if you want to make sense of advanced threats that cannot be detected using rules and threat intelligence, AI plays an important role. So it becomes an important tool for threat hunters to identify, either threats originating from unknown actors, or or threats that are completely unknown in nature. So I'll talk about how AI helps. So if you were to put try to create a quadrant of attackers and attacks, this is how it would look like. So on the top side, you have the known threat actors. We know a list of sources that can be qualified as known. And then you have the unknown threat actors. You don't know where the threat is originating. It could be from an insider, or it could be an external source which is currently not known, right? And from the attack perspective, you have the known attacks, which are easier to detect using the traditional techniques, and you have the unknown attacks. So, and if you were to place this in a quadrant, and try to see what kind of solutions, what kind of systems are going to help us identify those cyber threats, this is how it would look like. So you have the traditional solutions like SIEMs and OT sensors and IDS and IPS technologies that can identify all the known attacks, right? And to some extent, known attacks from unknown actors as well. Um, and threat intelligence plays an important role in identifying attacks from known threat actors. Today, the community is pretty strong to be able to give us that information. So any threat that originates from a known threat actor, even if the attack itself is unknown, threat intelligence becomes an important element in identifying that. But there is just still one segment where AI plays an important role, and that quadrant is the quadrant where both the attack is also not known and the attacker is also not known. And this is where AI becomes an important piece for for people operating security operations centers to be able to effectively identify unknown threats. Specifically important when we're looking at data from sources like industrial OT systems, cloud systems, OT environments, and try to see how that information can be fed into an AI system to profile that information, and allows us to identify anomalies that some of the traditional solutions may not be able to identify. So again, to summarize, AI plays an important role when we don't know where the attack is coming from, and of course, we don't even know what the type of attack is. Right. And I also mentioned the third aspect, which is the automation part of it. So from an automation perspective, we're looking at, I would look at three aspects. One is the ability to use automation to contain threats, right? So in the event we identify something suspicious using any of those techniques that I mentioned earlier, if there is an ability to quickly contain that threat, and isolate systems from the environment completely so that the smaller sections of the environment can be isolated before larger damage can happen. So that is a key use case for using automation in a SOC model. Uh, Analysis, right? So traditionally, we see security operations centers using a very manual-driven approach for conducting analysis, extracting information. But here, automation can play a huge role by allowing responders in security operations centers to gather information automatically so that they can take decisions faster, right? So over there also, an automation platform, an orchestration platform can really help in reducing the time to take response actions. And finally, incident response, right? Again, a system that can allow us to collaborate between different entities, different stakeholders, will really help in reducing the kind of downtime or the kind of ramifications that can happen if a particular cyber breach goes unresponded to. Right. So to summarize, how MDR, and I used the term MDR earlier, managed detection and response. That's where the industry is moving towards. You would see many providers using the term MDR to provide advanced detection services, and it's where the industry is moving towards. So essentially, what does it mean? It means the use of different techniques, going beyond traditional signature-based detection and using advanced analytics to identify threats. So that you're able to really provide advanced threat detection and detection services. Managed response, right? Using automation wherever possible to remediate or respond to threats faster. So a workflow system, a collaborative system that allows to accelerate investigation and response. And finally, the use of AI, right? AI to integrate, to make sense of the data that we collect, improve speed in identifying threats, and of course, handling large amounts of data. In combination with big data, AI can play wonders when you want to identify the right set of threats. So essentially, to summarize, a SOC model that should have these components, should look at the use of big data, should look at the use of artificial intelligence to help identify advanced threats, and also should look at using automation wherever possible to reduce the effect of a breach in the event it happens. Right. So with that,